But right now, I know the basics. I know what I need to know, and this is all you really need to play a game. You don't need to know every rule in the book. Thank you to my patron Echo for supporting the channel. Looking at the table of contents of any book, even in the preview on DriveThruRPG, is going to give you a lot of information. Character creation. Here's when I get this PDF, this is what I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the character creation rules. I'm going to look at the pursuits that are after character creation, so they must be related to them. Basic pursuits at a glance, assuming pursuits are classes. I know they're classes because I like this system, but that's something that I would do. I would look at the pursuits after looking at character creation. And then we've got the skills, we've got the gameplay. This talks about a fate deck, which means it's not using dice, it's using a deck of cards probably, so I'm going to be wanting to read this chapter probably first before I even read character creation. And they also have some sample characters, I think, subordinate characters right here, and Fate Master characters, so I might look at those to get an idea of how to build a character. Additionally, we have a bestiary, which is going to have all the monsters that are in the game, and I want to know what those monsters are. I'll take a look at a few of them, and it'll give me a hint as to what the players are up against, what they're going to face. And of course, we're going to have the character sheet, which I'm going to be always having as a character reference, or a reference document for myself, so that I know what skills they can roll, because they apparently do have skills, and how do they fight, and how do they take hits, and how much health do they have, and so forth. This is the Awkward GM Corbin and Theo, our channel mascot, and today we're going to be covering how you get started with new TTRPGs, how you get started with them without any knowledge of the system. If you're like me, you might have a large selection of role-playing game books that you just don't know how they work. For instance, I've got this old role-playing game book that was my first RPG, and I haven't played it in years. But if I open up the book, I know exactly where I need to go in order to figure out where everything is. The table of contents at the beginning of the book. This will be your guide to role-playing games. I know nothing about Starfinder, so I'm going to tell you how I would go about learning Starfinder from scratch. Most games are going to have the character creation rules broken out into their own chapter, as well as any races or species you can choose for your character and classes. Usually this section here, it looks like it will be a more detailed description of what your character's race or class can be. Something I usually look for are quick reference rules or quick reference character creation rules. This way I know how to build a character really quickly, or I know the broad strokes of what game mechanics I should be expecting to see during my gameplay. I don't see any quick reference rules here, so I'm going to scroll back to the bottom of the index here to see what they have. And it looks like they don't have anything in an appendix that is a quick reference guide, but what they do have is a character sheet, so we can... If this was a good PDF, I could click there. So going to the character sheet, we might be able to see some additional rules if they have them on the character sheet themselves. It doesn't look like they have them here, so what we've got here is just sort of, this is your character name, you're gonna have a class and a level, a race, a theme, whatever a theme is. This seems to be mechanics related because it's next to race and class, which are both mechanics related. And then we have the general stuff like what's your size, your speed, your gender, and your home world, as well as alignment, deity, and player, who the player is. So I'm thinking these bottom tier stuff here aren't really going to be game mechanic things. They're probably just going to be descriptors. We have the ability scores here, which is telling us that we're using sort of a D&D standard ability score array here, which I've played D&D before, I've played Pathfinder before, I know what these are. Now we go down to the skills just to see what skills we should be expecting our players to have. If I'm a GM, I want to know what skills to ask my players to roll. If I'm a player, I want to know what I'm going to be rolling. I'm not going to list these all off here. Some of the stuff that sort of comes out to me is that they have a bunch of sciences in here, such as engineering, life science, physical science, etc. Additionally, I see that we are using saving throws, and they have ability modifiers associated with them, which are based off of Constitution, Dexterity, and Wisdom. So immediately I already know what I'm working with here. So if you want to optimize your character without knowing the rules, you can just sort of look and see which of these ability scores go into other things. For instance, Dexterity goes into a fair number of the skills down here, as well as Charisma. If you have Dexterity, you're going to probably want to get Acrobatics, Sleight of Hand, Stealth, and maybe even Piloting as skills that you'd like. Additionally, Dexterity is going to be in your reflex saving throws, as well as your Dex mod is going to be added to your armor class. So it seems like Dexterity is something you may want to have, probably depending on what character class you choose as well, and I'm guessing there are going to be some recommendations there. So let's jump to the character creation section. When you go to the character creation chapter of books, you're usually going to find a step-by-step guide on how to create a character. You're going to have your character concept, you're going to have your character race, and that says here your theme. Now your theme is sort of like a background approach. You could be a bounty hunter, a scholar, etc. In addition to reflect a certain background, a theme provides benefits to certain skills at first level and grants 1 additional point to a specific ability score. This is cool. It's sort of like so it seems like themes here are a way to get extra ability points and skills when starting out. Additionally, it seems like they have a list of the various races, themes, and classes already here, just for your quick reference, but it doesn't give you any more details about like what mechanics they use. It's just going to give you like the broad strokes. Like an envoy is a charismatic person. So I'm gonna assume that an envoy has charisma as one of their character class abilities that they want to have, ability scores. Additionally, you can choose your class down here. It gives you some advice, and then you finalize your ability scores. You apply your class, you choose your skill ranks and feats, just like in Pathfinder, and you buy equipment, and then fill out all the rest of the details, which are your derived abilities, I think, for the most part, as well as a few things that are background related, such as your homeworld and your deity. And that's pretty much it for character creation. I know a bit about it. I know where to look now for information about character creation. I want to know how I'm actually going to be able to run this game. What dice are going to be used, and what's the skill checks and stuff that are going to be involved. And I'm going to look over at the Chapter 8, which is Tactical Rules. When you see a chapter that talks about tactics or combat, usually it means the actual game mechanics. So if I scroll down here, it's going to tell me how combat works. It's going to tell me about rolling for initiative. It's going to be rolling some dice here. Surprise rounds. I don't care about all this stuff. What I care about is the attack roll. An attack roll represents your attempt to hit an opponent at melee range or from range on your turn and round. You make attack rolls. You roll a d20 and add your attack bonus. I can look at some additional stuff here. I don't need to look at that now. Various other bonuses can be applied from features, feats, and so on. If your result equals or exceeds the armor class of your target, you hit and deal damage. That makes sense to me. I roll a d20 and I add some numbers to it, and if I beat the armor class of the enemy, I win. Now, there are some additional rules here that I don't really need to know right now, and what I actually want to look up is how I'm supposed to roll these dice, because this is the tactical rules, but where are the rules for skill checks? I don't see any of them here. Okay, action types. Actions in combat. Still don't really need this. I know that there's a move action, a standard action, a swift action, full actions, reactions, reactions, and an attack of opportunity. So basically a free action if your opponent does something that triggers it. Other actions seem very basic stuff here. Okay. So I just can't find where the skill checks are in this book. So I'm going to go back to the table of contents and I'm going to see there's an overview section. If I go to the overview section, what am I going to see here? I'm going to see stuff about game masters, players, the adventuring stuff, the basic concepts. Oh, here's some stuff. The This seems more like vocab words that I probably already know from playing other games, but this is a good thing to have. About experience points, abbreviations that they're going to be using for hit points, stamina points, and resolve points, whatever those are. You're going to have your armor class, your attack roll, your check, your combat, your creatures, encounters, stuff like this. Overview of play. There's role-playing, standard stuff here. Exploring, going around, checking things out. Tactical combat. Starship combat. There's an example of play. This is pretty long. I am not going to be reading this. And then I'm back to character creation. So overview was not what I needed to go to. I actually know where I need to go to. I'm just sort of showing you my process for going through a book. But I want to know what skill checks are. Skill checks are probably going to be in 130. Most games are going to have skill checks, or at least something that they refer to as skill checks or are synonymous with skill checks in other systems. So going to the section about skills, I'm probably going to see a giant list here about, well, first off, we're seeing how you acquire skills. This is stuff for character creation. I don't know why it's here, but apparently it is. So when your skill ranks per level for each of your class are here, which might as well just be in the class section. It probably is in the class section. I am not going to care about that rule. I'm going to see some words are going to pop out to me. Take 10 and take 20, which are essentially D20 type rules that essentially mean if you have time, you can tell the GM, I don't want to roll. I just want to do the bare minimum or do the maximum to try and get this check done in the best way possible. And your GM says, okay, you take 20. And it's as if you rolled a 20 on the die, but it's not a critical success. And did it succeed when you apply your attribute plus skill and stuff like that? I don't want to explain the rules of Starfinder. Get away. We're going to find how you roll the dice. And I am still not finding that here. I might have even overlooked it. It is probably here in the skill checks. You roll a d20, you add the total skill bonus to your roll, and your total skill bonus includes the following: your skill ranks and your trained class skill bonus. Associated ability score modifier. So this is basic stuff. You've basically got skill ranks that you've invested into your character, and then you get additional skill bonuses for being a class trained in that skill. And you have an ability score modifier that's going to be applied to that. And since this is a D20 system, and I'm assuming you know what a Dungeons & Dragons is, or any D20 system, a lot of people have played D20 systems. Maybe you haven't. You definitely will want to look into like additional stuff about attribute modifiers, because we just learned about them. We've learned about them through looking at the character sheet, but this will help us basically learn this new system. So as a player, I now know everything I need to about how this game works. I know how to make a character, how to roll dice in combat, and how to roll dice out of combat. That's all I really need to know. If I want to optimize my character or do something that's a little bit more drastic, like learn spellcasting, which is probably a whole different subsystem, I'm going to go into those sections when I start building my character and try and figure out what's going on. But right now, I know the basics. I know what I need to know, and this is all you really need to play a game. You don't need to know every rule in the book. Now, as a GM, what do I need to know? Well, I need to know these rules as well, just so that I know what to expect from my players. If I look at the character sheet, I'm going to know what they can do with that. But additionally, how do I, as a DM, run this game? Well, I'm going to go into the game mastering section, which is at the, if I go back to the glossary up here, it's going to tell me that the game mastering section is on this page. It's also going to tell me about environments, traps, how to read stat blocks, etc. This actually concerns me because it says how to read stat blocks. It doesn't say list of monster stat blocks right here. So I might not have any monster stat blocks in this book. I might have to go and buy a monster manual or something equivalent in order to have enemies for my players to fight. So we go to the game mastering section. It's going to tell me all this stuff about how are we going to build an adventure. Oh, and it's going to immediately go into the mechanics. That's great. It's going to start talking to me about stat blocks, how to use a stat block, how to design an encounter. Determine APL, which is the average party level. This represents how much of a challenge the group can handle. And then when you build a character, a monster fight, you basically have a challenge rating, which is the number that you compare to your player's APL to see if they are facing a difficult challenge. Now, a lot of people will stick to these rules very strictly and say, okay, the players are going to go up against a challenge rating this, and they have an APL of this. That means this encounter is going to be difficult for them. Well, it's not, because your players are going to have long rests or short rests or some way of recovering their resources, and if you space out your encounters, a difficult encounter at the very start of a day is going to be a lot easier than a difficult encounter at the end of the day when they've used up all their spell slots or whatever they have, or resources that they use special abilities. In Chronicles of Darkness, for instance, you might have Essence as a werewolf, and if you are starting the day with full Essence and you're fighting a bunch of different enemies, and at the end of the day you have no Essence left, you're not going to be able to use your powers. That's number one in character in encounter building. You need to be aware of how much of the resources your players use do they have left. It's going to throw a lot of stuff in here that you probably don't know yet, and if you're a new storyteller or game master in this regard, you're probably going to have to figure this stuff out by reading this section here. Encounter building is something that I appreciate from a lot of game masters. There are a lot of players who will be like, we don't need to have encounters being built by the game master. Like, the encounter should feel like what would happen in real life. Like, if I go into a mobster's den and I piss off the mobster, all the mobsters in the entire joint are going to try and kill me. Well, that sounds like it's realistic, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be fun to play. Now, if we scroll down here, there's a bunch of things about awarding XP to your players, about giving them wealth per level, but as I said before, I do not see any enemy stat blocks here. And if I scroll down all the way to the bottom here, do I see any stat blocks? Man, they have a lot of stuff in here. There's still a trap section? Okay, I love a good trap section, I'm not gonna lie. Different effects, how to read a stat block. They gave me a stat block for a space goblin. This is great. And it's a CR20 space goblin monarch. Spelled incorrectly because space goblins don't know how to spell. But in any case, this is a stat block. This basically has stuff that you'll have to give to your players and say you don't give it to your players, but your players are going to face this guy and you're going to need to know how to run it. And it's going to be very similar to running a player character from what I can tell. I just assume because I see there's AC here and I see there's a fort ref and will save and stuff like your melee attacks, your ranged attacks. I usually like looking at the NPC stat blocks first in a lot of games. Sometimes games don't have stat blocks for their NPCs. That can be an issue, but what this is telling me right now is if I'm going to use my melee attack, my dog slicer, I'm going to get plus 28 to the roll to hit my players. Well, this will probably kill a level 1 character pretty quickly. But I also see that it has 13d6 damage plus 22. That's where the actual deadliness part. This is the damage. This is the accuracy. So it's going to hit well, and then it's going to do a crap ton of damage. Additionally, we have here AC, which AC stands for armor class in most D&D type games. I see there's an EAC and I see a KAC. This is telling me that there's something that starts with E and something that starts with K, and it means, and those different things mean that this person has a different AC depending if they get hit with these different attacks. I'm assuming energy AC and kinetic AC. Energy for energy weapons like lasers, kinetic for anything that's more physical like a bullet or a sword hitting you. Again, this is the first time I'm looking at these rules, and I might have made mistakes along the way. If I have, please let me know in the comments below. But essentially, this is something you can apply to any number of different role-playing games if you want to try and figure out how they work. This is Editor Corbin here. I forgot to talk about lore. Lore is an important thing to know when you grab a TTRPG. For the most part, I will just look at the overview in the beginning section of any of these books, and it'll usually give me a good rundown of what the game is about in the broadest of strokes. And if I really want to get deep and detailed into the lore, I'll look and read into more of the lore-based chapters. They usually have a name that is very narrative and fluffy, like it's like, the War of the Roses, or this is the era of peace and this is the era of war, and you look into those sections and it tells you the lore of the game. Additionally, I am not one for that for the most part, because while lore is important, I really care more about backstory. I care about the backstory of my player characters. I care about how they interact with other people in the world. I did a video on how I plan my campaigns, and while there are a lot of elements that are, this is a creature or this is a faction that's from the game, I don't go into the lore. I don't go into the origins of these factions. I usually make sure that my players know that whoever they're interacting with is an individual first and their faction second. So maybe this person is really all about killing werewolves, but if we go into the lore, this faction that they're a part of doesn't really attack werewolves. Why would that be? And I'm like, well, it's because of this person's individual behavior, not because of the faction. That's your answer. You don't need to go into the lore for this answer. I hope that helps. That's just my thinking on the subject. Please let me know if you have any other thoughts on it in the comments below. Let's look at Cyberpunk Red, a game that I actually have no idea how it works. So I'm going to go into the table of contents here. Table of contents, it looks like each of these sections has a name that is something that is like really cool and edgy for a cyberpunk adventure. It's very difficult, however, for using this to actually identify what that section is about. So there's a street slang thing here, which is what we would call in Chronicles of Darkness a lexicon. It's going to tell you the various different words that are used in Cyberpunk 2020. Is it whatever Cyberpunk Red? It's going to have those words that you'll need to know. Soul of the Machine. This seems to have some of your character creation rules. What are statistics and skills? This is probably going to tell me how I'm going to do a skill roll, so I'm going to check that page out. Getting things done. This actually tells me a lot more. It says revolving actions with skills, and that's something I'm going to have to check out. Combat rules are here. Scrolling around here, do I see anything about goons and grunts and stuff like that? Oh yeah, mooks and grunts. I'm familiar with the term mooks from a game called Spycraft. Mooks and grunts are probably like some of your enemies that you're gonna have. I see that it's only 5 pages, so maybe it's not that great of a description. I don't know. Encounters in the red. This probably is your rules for building an encounter. So I think you basically have the basics here as well. Lastly, I'm going to do a system that I know nothing about. I'm going to go with Monster of the Week. Full-size preview here, Monster of the Week, sample section going down here. How to play. You have an agenda, you have something called moves. basic moves. I'm assuming these are your skill checks. Because I don't see much... Oh, I do see much about combat. I see something about unarmed attacks and improvised weapons, so that's there, as well as big magic. I do see character creation rules in the form of the hunters. So hunters, the first session, this seems like you're getting things created or generated, concepts, making your character. It's all just a couple of pages. Like, seriously, you're going from page 17 to page 27 for character creation rules. That's not a lot of pages, so I'm guessing there's a lot of stuff going on here. The playbooks, I've heard of the playbooks from Powered by the Apocalypse. These are essentially your character classes. This term jumps out to me. How to play stuff, that's basic stuff. Like you're gonna make attack rolls, you're gonna have these move actions that you do that are kind of like skill checks or ability checks, as it were. I think basic moves and stuff, I think moves are sort of like your special abilities as well as skill checks in these games, but I'm not too sure. I don't see anything about monsters and harm. Monster and Harm, it is literally page 110 to 113, which tells me that there is probably not a glossary of enemies. Now, if I scroll down here, though, oh man, this is a big thing. This is a big book. It seems like they have a lot of the rules up front here, but we've got... It's about hunters, not the mystery. Introduction to mysteries. So this is stuff like how do you build your sessions, using magic, using big magic, arcs, creating story arcs. This book is a lot more narrative based than games I'm used to or the ones that I like to play. I still don't see a bestiary in here, so I'm going to assume having a bestiary in this book is not something that the developers really want you to have. They're more like the stuff that your characters are going to be worrying about is going to be on their character sheet, not going to be some sort of stat block that they're going to have to try and overcome. So we'll just roll with it. I mean, I've said in my Call of Cthulhu video that you shouldn't be stuck to monster stat blocks. Your characters will roll their dice, and if they get a success, they get a success, and you just roll with it. And if they're getting shot at by someone, you don't roll to attack, you have them roll to dodge, and that's what you do. It makes combat move so much more cinematically, and it keeps your players on their toes, and they don't feel like that they're fighting against a monster in the same way that they're fighting you. They don't think that they're fighting the game master if they're rolling their own dice to see if they survive. All the power is in their hands, not in the game master's hands. And that's why I think Call of Cthulhu, when I run it, can be a very scary game for the players, because they know I'm not trying to kill them. They know it's all on them if they fail to survive. I hope I have assuaged your fear of starting a new tabletop RPG. If you're starting a new one, please let me know which one it is in the comments below. Maybe I'll take a look at it and I can do a Beyond D&D episode about it. Additionally, I'm going to be putting a video somewhere around here that YouTube is selecting for you. It's probably going to be here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one.